Rick, Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai Ba'Hashem, Wakakadash, Barakatham, to the elders and apostles, Wa'akim, Wa'akwaf, and I say Shalom. And this is a sit-down lesson of the, this is a sit-down lesson from from finance.yahoo.com, published by Amalia Dubrovsky, if I pronounce her name right, from yahoofinance.com as of April the 16th, 2025 at 6:11 p.m. And this is a news article from Yahoo Finance, and it reads, the stock market today, Dow Jones, S&P 500, NASDAQ futures wave with tariff concerns back in focus. It says the U.S. stock futures trade flat on the heels of a rushing day off Wall Street. That the underscoring the fears over the economic impact of President Donald Trump's tariffs. Futures attach the Dow Jones Industrial Average YM equals F and the benchmark S&P 500 ES equal F head steady. Futures attached to the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite NQ equal F ticked up 0.1%. The stocks indeed the stocks extended their slide on Wednesday as Powell, speaking in Chicago, issued his starkest warning yet on how tariff could affect the economy. The Fed chair said that the central banks will likely face a challenging scenario, considering he expects the levies to exacerbate, if I pronounced that right, inflation and slow economy growth. It says Powell also threw cold water on hopes of the central bank will administer interest rates as tariffs rose, and said Fed officials will wait for greater clarity on Trump's trade policy. It says before and after the Powell spoke, NVIDIA shares tanks on news the chip giant would face new curbs from the U.S. government on sales to China. On Thursday, the focus for Wall Street will be Netflix quarterly earnings report, which is set for a release after the bell. With big tech unsettled by Trump's tariffs, the screen giant has emerged as a real bright spot among the group's investors hold high hopes for its results. Also reporting earnings on Thursday's chip making TSMC. The TSM, the chip maker, is expected to report to rise to profit, but likely NVIDIA Trump's trade will weigh heavy on its outlook. So the markets, the Dow Jones was down 600 points. I would say, 699 points, 0.57 and 1.373% down today. Right, so the S&P 500 was down 2.24%. The NASDAQ was down 2.2%, and the NASDAQ composite was down 3.7%. It says stock markets rise. Stock future rises after a major average tumble in the tech sector sell off. Live updates. The Dow Jones fall nearly 700 points. It says the stock markets today, NASDAQ slides 3% at the U.S. tightens curve on NVIDIA. The Dow Jones dropped 700 points after Federal Chair Jerome Powell warns of economic risk. It says the tech stock rout fueled by trade restriction. Deepening Wednesday with the NASDAQ down 3.1% and NVIDIA sliding 6.9%. The third largest company by market value warned late Tuesday that it will make $5.5 billion charge after the U.S. It will need a license and export H20 processing to China and other countries. These less powerful AI chips have been designed to comply with American export controls. The government control confirmed the restrictions and said it has put similar curves on the rival AMD. Stocks took another turn lower as Federal Reserve Chairman Powell, Jeremy Powell, warned that the central bank could face difficult trade-off in trying to cushion in the U.S. economy from the fallout of President Donald Trump's trade war. Investors hoping for more concentrated path to interest rate cuts were disappointing. A later, a late day rally trimmed some market losses, which at some point the Nasdaq down more than 4.4%, and the S&P 500 dropped 2.2%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 1.7% or 700 points. You can catch Powell's remarks here in Wednesday's full market roundup here. Early Wednesday, Commerce Department data suggested that the U.S. consumer front-loaded purchase during March. The retail sales surged 1.4% last month as car buyers rushed to dealerships to get ahead of auto tariffs. The rise was even bigger than expected. In tech, another industry uh, linchpin, also rather investors, the ASML, whose huge chip costly are needed to make more advanced chips, reporting much weaker than expected. Orders warned about tariff-related disruptions. Shares fell 5.2%. The trade It said the trade terminal almost hit the country's oldest industry. Shipping shares JB Hunt Transport Service lost 7.7 after the company reported on Tuesday and dropped 8% in the net earnings. In the first quarter, the company blamed slower demands for retailers caused by over tariffs. It says the Wall Street fears gods by the Corvette Volatile Index jumped 8% after falling for three trades days. The dollar, meanwhile, extended its decline. Wrangling over tariffs continues, with the state leaders in California moving to sue President Donald Trump administration. And President Trump says he will join trade talks with the Japanese delegations. Beijing named a new top trade negotiator, a former ambassador to the World Trade Organization. New data. It says a slower China showed China was able to sustain its growth rate in the past quarter, helping by a surge of exports, while U.S. imports are anticipating new tariffs. Major index Asia and Europe decline. This is Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 7. This is Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 7. It says, Babylon has been Salakia. Jeremiah 51, verse 7. Babylon has been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunk of wine, therefore the nations are mad. But you're still going to see these nations do these economic tariffs on the United States, even though the Trump administration have paused even though they have paused the 90-day tariffs on these countries. So that's the markets still going to be affected by that. So potentially, as Jeremy Powell spoke at a press conference Wednesday, said what these increasing tariff talks, despite the fact there's a 90-day pause on these tariffs on Trump, was going to use on the export goods, and he's still going to have ongoing trade wars between the United States and China, which is two economical powers. So the markets is still going to react what's going on with these economic tariffs, because it's still more raising concern about these economic tariffs that the United States using on China and China using on them back and forth, despite the fact that he had paused the economic tariffs on the nations until the next 90 days. But you're still going to have these increasing trade wars are heating up between China and the United States. And that kind of worries the markets, because the markets react with these latest trade tariffs. So we're going to see how it's going to react tomorrow, just like it has reacted for the past 2 days, in these past couple of weeks or so as well too. Jeremiah 51 verse 7. Babylon has been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunk for wine, therefore the nations are mad. Jeremiah 51 verse 8. Babylon suddenly fall and destroyed. How for her take bond for her pain is so that she may be healed. Jeremiah 51 verse 9. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsaken her, let us go every once his own country, for her judgments reaches the heavens, slid up into the skies. This is the book of Revelations. Revelations 18 and verse 2. And he cried mighty with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, is become a habitation of deceivers, and they hold every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean HATEF word. Revelations 18 verse 3. For all the nations had drunken wine for wrath and fornication, and the kings of the earth had committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So with that, hopefully this sit down lesson was edifying of this recent news article as the markets crash nearly 700 points. Yep, as the Dow Jones went down nearly 700 points, which is 699 points. So that was close. Might as well say it was down 700 points. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ was all down today. As it says, the Dow Jones dropped 700 points as Federal Chair Jerome Powell warns of economic risk. So with that, once again, hopefully this sit-down lesson was edifying. And with that, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai Ba'Hashem Makakadash, Barakatham, to the elders and apostles, Wa'akim Wa'akwaf, and let's say Shalom, and the Heavenly Father, true name is Yahweh, and His only begotten Son, Ba'Hashem, and the name of Mashiach Yahushua. Those are the true names in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, the last one Kadashul tongue. And I say Barakatham to the elders and apostles, Wa'akim Wa'akwaf. Until next time, I will say Shalom.